Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. The field of education in emergencies is full with stories. Some are sad stories, and many are very good stories. Nonetheless, these stories inspire us and motivate us to keep pursuing the right to education for every child and youth in the midst of emergency. Stories can be some of the most powerful tools to advocate and influence policymakers, donors, or even the communities where we work. According to the Harvard Business Review, telling stories is one of the most powerful means that leaders have to influence, teach, and inspire. What makes storytelling so effective for learning? For starters, storytelling forges connections among people and between people and ideas. Stories convey the culture, history, and values that unite people. Today's workshop has been in the works for several months, and on behalf of the Interagency Network for Education in Emergencies and INE's Advocacy Working Group, we welcome you to this very exciting learning event. The Advocacy Working Group seeks to find ways to, as its name indicates, advocate to prioritize for education in the context of emergencies. But we also develop learning events such as this one to build capacity of all of us in this field. Very important right now in context of the pandemic. And for today's workshop, we're very happy to partner with Illuminate. Illuminate's mission is to help in educating the world's poorest billion people through low-cost video technology. Illuminate's founder, Matt York, whose ideas to develop the organization began in 1973 with one idea in mind: to harness the potential of technology for the benefit of humankind. So we're honored to have this visionary man be the main facilitator of today's workshop. And without further ado, I want to introduce Matt and the Illuminate's team to conduct this workshop. My name is Gustavo Payan, and I have been one of the co-chairs of the Advocacy Working Group. And I want to welcome you and thank you for joining us today. Matt, the floor is yours.
Good day. Just wanted to say greetings to everyone, wherever you may be. Thanks for the opportunity to be part of this presentation. Kristen is with me, and my colleague Kristen. And we're excited to help you become more effective in telling your stories. Sometimes the people who need to hear your stories may be funders. Other times it might be colleagues who have the authority to allocate more resources to you. Other times it's colleagues or supervisors that just need to have a better idea of what you're doing. So it'll be an exciting time today to empower each of you to tell stories. You can apply our knowledge through text and audio or podcasts. But our specialization is video, and many of you may not have produced a lot of video. We'll talk an awful lot about video today, from shooting and planning and editing. Editing we'll spend very little time on because it's a very complex topic. But we're looking forward to empowering you to become better storytellers today. And Kristen's going to do a little housekeeping now about what it's going to be like to administer the workshop over the next time we're going to spend together.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kristen, and I'm a volunteer with Illuminate. Thank you so much for joining us today. As Matt said, in today's workshop, we're going to be talking to you about why storytelling should be an essential tool in your advocacy toolkit, and how you can use the structure of story across a variety of mediums and uses. We do have a workbook. I've linked it in the chat, and in just a second, I will link it again so that you can download it if you don't have it yet. Please also feel free to type your questions into the chat. We'll be taking some questions along the way, as well as holding a larger Q&A at the end of today's webinar. So Matt, why don't you start off by telling our audience about the work that Illuminate does?
So we're a humanitarian film charity. So we are committed to ensuring that humanitarian films are made and seen in the world's poorest countries, enabling a better quality of life. So the word film these days, inclusive of video, and really, actually, within the poorest countries, we tend to specialize in disconnected areas, the most impoverished parts of the country, who tend to have little to no internet or little to no electricity. So we do this work by training staff members of non-government organizations or ministries of government. We equip them. We provide technology, cameras, video cameras, microphones, tripods. Cordless video projectors are our most important item, and recharging equipment. So all of this stuff could be recharged off grid. So we've got a poll question for you now.
All right. We'd like to get a sense of how often you are using storytelling in your advocacy work right now. Would you say that you lean on storytelling very often, somewhat often, not very often, or almost never? Go ahead and enter your answer into the poll. It'll take just a few more seconds. All right, let's wrap up in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, it looks like the majority of you are using storytelling not very often, with about 52% of you with that response. And only 12% of attendees today are using storytelling very often. So let's try to increase this percentage through today's session.
Okay. All right, in session one, here's a learning objective. So for the next few minutes, we're going to focus on a handful of things, and this is what we hope that you'll learn. The basics of storytelling, it's an art form. It's a discipline to be attentive to in and of itself. Usually, it could be referred to as a 3-act structure. Some of us have debates about whether or not that's cultural. There are cultural differences about the structure, or 3 acts or 5 acts or 7 acts, but we have to have a common language. Understand the types of characters, which are a key element within a story, are the characters who appear on camera, their voices appear, their names, and they serve a key purpose in a story. And how to use video as a medium for advocacy. So encourage people to buy on to what you're advocating for and what you're all about. So we're going to jump into our session on storytelling. So we're all natural storytellers. Humans in all cultures come to cast their own identity in some sort of narrative. We all have ancient wisdom in books written long, long ago. A story, by definition, is a sequence of non-fictional or fictional events. You can see here we've got a few people, in this particular case in Malawi. They're telling a story. You can kind of tell because someone is attentive and listening. 2 people are using hand gestures. So we all tell stories. It's an important aspect of our culture. And this is how we pass wisdom on from one generation to the next. So prior to the media overflow that we have in this day and age, in the year 2021, we really relied primarily on ink and paper. But gosh, we have so many choices now, so much social media. So this is all about storytelling. So the 3 main components are setting, character, and plot. We'll go into more detail. Here's a setting of a dirt road in a relatively rural area. There's a character being focused on the right. Looks like an older man who's got some wisdom, perhaps because of his gray hair. And we don't know the plot here because there's not enough information. So the setting is really where the story takes place. So depending upon your audience, you want to use locations that are familiar to you and the people who you're trying to represent there. So if most of your characters conduct their affairs outside, the setting should be outside. If it's a health clinic, maybe it's more likely inside. If it's formal education, maybe in a schoolroom. And using the languages that are most appropriate, again, for the audience. And we'll talk a little later about how to translate and transpose and to subtitle. So you really do want to tailor the setting to a specific community. Often we are trying to alter behavior with our partners in a given community. So we want to be sure that the wisdom espoused by the characters on camera in the setting are relevant to the community that people are operating in. So the setting is an important part of the story. The character is a person that participates in the events and the actions of the plot. So you want to use authentic actors. And by authentic, we mean people who are expressive. So there's lots of ways to be expressive. We can express ourselves by being verbose, using lots of words, descriptive words, adjectives, but also, since we're using video, people who will express themselves with hand gestures and facial expression and voice tone. So if you have your choice between two characters you're recruiting, two on-screen actors, choose the one that's more expressive and authentic. And actually, people who are not really acting, they're just kind of telling their story. And maybe there's a little bit of coaching, but not really acting. But people here in front of the camera is called talent or actors. Key elders or respected individuals are also a valuable trait to be a good character in the story. And then we have the plot. These are the events that make up the story. So again, there's a sequence of events. In video, each event could be either a shot, which is an individual video clip, or a scene, which is a group of clips that kind of are in a common theme before it moves on to another scene. So the plot really are the events that make up a story. So if you have a plot and you've got good characters and you have a good setting that you have access to, so we don't want to dream up an idea of having a video in a difficult to access location. You can't have a story that you're being told in the president's palace because you probably can't get in there, or if you can, you're not going to get permission to shoot inside the president's palace. So these are all things that you got to think about as you're beginning to plan out the story that you're going to tell. So again, this is not universal around the world, but I think for purposes of our plan today, we can talk about the 3-act structure, which was developed by Freytag, a man with great wisdom many, many hundreds of years ago. And there's 3 acts. Each has a very important component. The longest one you can see on the chart here is Act 2. So in Act 1, this is where everything is displayed or demonstrated. So what is the setting? Where are we in the world? Sometimes you can start with a map or a shot of a calendar if it has happened in the past. So we expose in Act 1, where are we? With an establishing shot, wide shot of a school or a health center. And also, most importantly, we want to introduce the characters here. So we want to begin to get our audience to be emotionally invested in the characters by telling a little bit of their background and their backstory. So this is where we demonstrate that, and we expose everything, typically, except perhaps an antagonist. So in a story, you usually have a protagonist, the person who's going to be the hero or the victim, depending upon if it's a comedy or a tragedy. If the ending is sad, it's technically called a tragedy, and the victim fails. If it's a comedy, which is not necessarily funny, but there's joy at the end, and that's where the protagonist meets with success and is a hero. But the antagonist, the person in their way, is usually exposed in Act Two, where you have this inciting incident. And the antagonist actually could be something else, like a coronavirus in this day and age. Could be not a human being, but a virus where the pandemic begins. And then there's rising action between the protagonist and the antagonist. And each of the people in the story have their role to play. Again, all of it trying to be sure that the audience is relating to them emotionally, because we all can relate to maternal characters, mothers, or paternal characters, fathers, or siblings, or cousins, or friends. So in Act Two, which is the longest act, there's just this back and forth between the different characters till there's a climax, which we all hope in our world today, in the spring and summer of 2021, we begin to have the end of the explosion of the coronavirus. And then we have falling action where things begin to resolve, there's resolution. And at the very end, we actually want to sit with some joy or sadness and experience those emotions in something called the denouement, in the resolution. So you don't want to just end it. You want people to actually soak in what has just happened. That's the 3-act structure. So let's watch this silent video right now. It was created to the most basic concept of a story, and it's so vague that you might not actually see it as a story. And many of you might actually see a different story, because this is an animated piece, again, designed to be vague. So it'll be a little challenging. And then we'll do a breakout session to see if you could tell what is the story going on here. So here we go. So this was created several decades ago, and it's a very simple animation. Okay, you're going to go into a breakout group now.
Okay, we're gonna go into some breakout rooms now. When you get into your breakout room, discuss the video with your peers. Think about the basics of storytelling that Matt has covered so far. What is the setting of the video? Who are the characters? What is the plot? We will give you about 10 minutes. Someone from your team, your group, should be prepared to type a summary of your discussion in the main room chat when we get back.
Well, well, oh, hello, hello. Good afternoon for everyone. I'm Mohammed from Iraq. I'm working with
Okay. Did anybody make note of the setting, the characters, or the plot? Those are the things that we're looking for. And I don't think we're going to spend too much time on unpacking that. Is that right, Kristen?
No, I was going to read
Okay,
out some of the
okay.
responses.
Okay.
So if you've just joined us and you were not in the breakout rooms, we were discussing a silent film, a very short silent film. And those of you that are just returning from the breakout rooms, go ahead and type into the chat some notes about things that your breakout room discussed related to the video that you saw. I'll read off just a few of the responses. And in case you were wondering, even here at Illuminate, we did not have consensus on the plot of the short video. So let's see, we have Vic who wrote down 3 characters, the larger triangle, the smaller triangle, and the circle. I also really like what you wrote here about the setting, that we have the enclosure or the house around the larger triangle and outside the house, which are the 2 settings, and the fact that we can see both settings because we are watching from above. That's a really astute observation. Let's see, we have some notes about the rising action related to the bigger triangle leaving the house. The smaller triangle is threatening as the circle sneaks into the house. And it's interesting. I imagine there was something to retrieve. It's funny how we can infer a lot of things from very simple animations. A lot of notes about how simple animation can convey action and emotion. I hope this was a good example that you don't need a really intricate or detailed video to convey an in-depth story. Some people interpreted it as a story of conflict or even domestic violence. Very interesting take. We have words like attacking, trying to prevent attacks, but getting attacked. Very, very interesting. The setting could be a family narrative. It could also be a mission. Very interesting comments here. One version was a family. The triangles were the mother and father, and the circle was a child. So see, there's so many different interpretations that we can all make from the same very simple illustration or animation. So now that we have covered what constitutes a story, we're going to move into the next portion of our workshop.
Okay, yeah, very interesting. That's a great little video made for the purpose of the things that we experienced together as a group. So I'm glad that our breakout room was a success. So how to get started? So the most important component of storytelling, in my humble opinion, is the conceptualization phase. So right now in your mind, you know that there's a story to be told for something. And there's a bit of an obstacle between you and getting that story told. So you need to come up with a cogent concept, something that's succinct and makes sense. And you need to actually collaborate with your colleagues. Usually you do this with colleagues, not all the time, but you should have someone outside just to help you identify what is the concept. So what is the basic concept of your story? So in developing your concept, you want to think about the audience. So what do you want them to do? Who will be most impacted? So you want to think, how do you serve the audience ultimately to achieve your ends? Since you're the author of the story, you pretty much try to decide the audience you're going to aim it at and how you want them to be impacted. And who's willing to change? You don't want to be directing a story at people who are not changeable. Better choose a different audience, maybe a slightly different concept. And who do you have access to? Again, I mentioned if you want a story that includes the president of your country, you probably don't have access to the president. Maybe you could take clips of the president down off of YouTube or something. And also the people who do see your story, can they encourage other people who haven't seen the story, but you're going to pass the story along. So these are parts of identifying your audience and in your conceptualization stage. So it's very important to understand messaging. So just by this video here, without me saying too much, you might be able to figure out what's going on, but you can see someone that we've trained in the white shirt is using a camera, a phone, to record an agricultural advisor in the green shirt speaking to a woman farmer about an agricultural product. She's got some produce there, it looks like, or some leaves, obviously, and there's a basket and a bucket and some water. So the message here is how to adopt a new agricultural practice. In this particular case, it's how to, from local ingredients, how do you create an insecticide or an insect repellent for agriculture? And how do you want to, excuse me, convey that message? So messaging is an essential part of the concept. How do you convey the message? So that concludes session 1. And now we're gonna move on to session 2, and we've got 3 learning objectives here. So this is the basics of video production. Now that we have a reasonable understanding of storytelling, again, we're going pretty fast, and it's a lot to learn for some of you. So the basics of video production, using scripts to efficiently plan video shots, and how to create a storyboard. So we're ready to move into the video part of our learning today. So there are 3 phases of video production. Video production is there in the center, is shooting with the video camera or recording with a microphone if you're making a podcast. So that's the basics. And there's things that happen before production, pre-production. So it's planning the shooting with a camera, identifying the main message or goal, we talked about that, and writing a script. And in post-production, after production, is editing the video or the audio or the written story. In our case, it's a video, and exporting a complete video from your video editor. So when we say script writing, we'll start with pre-production. You know, a script could be technically like for a feature-length motion picture that you'd see in a theater. Every word is typically written by an author, and the actors memorize the words or they read it off a teleprompter. For the kind of work that we do, typically it's an outline. So just like this PowerPoint, I am using it to trigger in me some things that I will say extemporaneously without a great deal of preparation. It's not word for word. So a script can be either word for word or an outline. And what we want to do with our script and our storyboard is to make changes with an eraser and a pencil and paper rather than reshooting video. Reshooting videos is time consuming. If you've got to travel a long way, you've got to recruit the same on-camera talent or actors again. So you really want to make all of the changes that you may need to make before you start the production process, because it's just much more efficient and thrifty to make changes ahead of time. And in post-production, you edit with software on a computer or on a phone. These days, there's editing packages for a phone. And at the end, you export the video as an MP4 file. So these are the phases of video production, and we want to bear them in mind from the get-go. So during the conceptualization stage, you actually are, it's almost pre-production conceptualization. And then you get into kind of a bit of a formal process of planning, scheduling, and writing out your plans. And then shooting, and then post-production, which is the editing process. So here's another device. It's not essential. It's an audio-visual script. So all of you may now have in your own mind a beginning, the concept may be there, it's beginning to come together, but you really need to share it with some other people to objectify it, even if you're going to make it on your own. Again, it's wonderful to make video in a team, but this is a pretty kind of a rough outline of what the script is, the audio-visual script. It's your video on a piece of paper with no pictures, just words. Uh, it includes typically the words being said under the audio column. The left column are the words that might be heard, that's going to be recorded on audio. It's going to come out of the speakers. And sometimes those also appear as a title in text on the video. And on the right-hand column, it's what people are going to see. What the setting is, and what the kind of shot there is, a wide shot versus a close-up. We'll talk a little bit about that later. Close-up obviously is very close, and a medium shot is a bit further away, and a wide shot is very, very far away. So there's an audiovisual script, not essential, but a pretty handy device for you to use in planning and pre-production. So storyboards are kind of a step away from that. You can see an example of one in the upper left. It's actually text with some illustrations, very, very crude illustrations. You don't need to be an artist here. So we use storyboards throughout the entire three-phase process. So in pre-production, it provides a snapshot of the process. It gets all stakeholders kind of aligning their vision, not just the kind of in their own imagination, but when you actually start to draw something, people are having a better understanding of how the story is coming together. In the production process, while you're actually shooting the video, you would actually have the storyboard there to make sure that you're matching your intentions and your plans. It's like a checklist of things that you're going to do, allows you to be really prepared for shooting. And in post-production, you wind up using it as a guide. And you can also alter the storyboard, make a new version on the way, because you will probably iterate a little bit, but not too much. So storyboards are a really great tool. You don't need to be a fantastic artist. Even this art skills on this storyboard are greater than mine. So just stick figures, like the bottom middle there, just stick figures, maybe a smiley face or a sad face. So while the script only uses text, this uses a sequence of drawings representing the shots of a video, accompanied by very abbreviated text in the script. The words that might be heard from the speakers recorded by the microphone. And the images allow for the visualization of different shots, angles, and composition for the camera operator. It could be you, but sometimes you actually hand the script to the storyboard maker. The storyboard maker hands it to a camera operator. So while in your case, it might be you doing the whole thing, sometimes you actually hand things off to different colleagues or collaborators. So it's a really great device. Also for getting approval. If this is an important video and your supervisor, you want to be sure you're conveying a message that's approved by headquarters, you want to get approval at each one of these stages, the script, the storyboard. So now we'll enter another breakout room. I'll hand it over to Kristen. We're going to talk about getting from a concept to a project.
All right, everyone, it's time to go start putting your ideas into action. So we're going to go back to our breakout rooms. We want you to talk with your peers about your ideas for using storytelling in your advocacy work. What is the story you want to tell? Think about all of the pieces that Matt has talked about so far. Who are the characters? What's the setting? And what's the plot? What is the message you want to convey and to what audience? And what medium will you do it through? As Matt said, that could be a video, a podcast, or even something like an email campaign. You'll have about 15 minutes to chat. When we come back to the main rooms, we'd love for you to type your stories into the main room chat so that we can read some of them if you're comfortable with that.
Well, hello, everybody. We are sure that you enjoyed your breakout session and you learned a lot and you began planning, which is always tricky with people that you don't know and maybe never met before. But again, a good exercise to kind of get the hang of it. The picture that we see on the screen here shows people collaborating with a storyboard in front of them. So I know you're all kind of gathering back again for your breakout room activities. So this is all about making sure that we apply what we're learning in real time.
All right, before we move on to the next portion of our session, I'd like to read a few stories. Go ahead and start typing in the chat so that we can read a few of the projects that you guys discussed with your groups while I'm waiting for a few seconds for people to type. I will remind everyone to please type any questions that you have for Matt into the chat. We will be doing a long Q&A at the end of today's webinar, because I know that's kind of like everyone's favorite portion, is being able to kind of get some insight and wisdom into exactly how to bring your stories to life through video. So I popped into a few of your breakout rooms, and I noted that there were quite a few people who are already using video to some extent. I listened to some people discussing using both video and also like still photography as photo stories. Let's see, we have Vic who says, as part of building a curriculum for students, I am working with the stories of survivors of the Bosnian genocide in the 1990s by focusing specifically on Bosnian women's narratives, which have not been represented in the existing literature. Thank you, Vic. Go ahead and type your stories into chat, and we'll probably come back around to them several times throughout the session. So if you're still typing, don't feel like you have to stop. Go ahead and complete your thought, put it into chat, and we'll come back and read some of them later. Matt is now going to move into a section of the webinar where he'll talk about the key skills that will help anyone to take great video. I do recommend that if you have like a smartphone or a camera phone with you, to kind of be going along through the steps. When Matt is talking about how to set up a shot in a specific way, go ahead and like try to recreate it on your own and snap a few pictures. No one will know. No one will know if you're getting it right or not. It's a great time to practice along with Matt as he's kind of explaining the concepts.
Okay, so again, if there's more sharing of the breakout rooms, we'll discuss it during this next session 3, our final session. The learning objectives are shooting techniques. So exactly how do you capture excellent video? How do you set up a shot? So a shot is a singular component of video. When you basically what happens between the time that you hit the start button and the stop button, that's called a shot, and ultimately becomes an MP4 file, also called a video clip, with a name on it. It appears on your phone or in the camcorder, and ultimately you drag it onto your desktop, and it actually has a name, and it's a video file. And understanding the general principles of editing. Editing is a big topic, a tough thing to teach through distance learning like today. So we're going to compress that a lot, but actually it's the most complex part of making a good video. So we'll talk about shooting, setting up shots, and understanding editing principles today. Again, this is where we will be using our scripts and storyboards. So when your storyboard is a wonderful tool during the shooting technique. When you're actually shooting video, you really have it ideally on a clipboard or on a large book, so you can make notes in the field. And taking your time to set up a shot. Each of them, you want to be extraordinarily deliberate and really attentive to whatever shot looks like. You're really a composer. You're actually like an artist deciding exactly where to point that camera. How will you zoom it, and what direction will you aim it at exactly? Where would you set up? Where do you stand compared to the talent? And understanding the general principles of editing. So you want to you start out like with location scouting. So in your mind and in your planning, you have a setting, but now you actually have to choose the setting. So, I mean, technically kind of like the GPS coordinates, you don't really need that, but you really want to figure out exactly where you're going to go. You don't want to say we're going to go to the town of Salima, a town in Malawi, but you want to decide not only the street you're going to be on, but you want to actually pick the spot that your talent's going to stand in and where you're going to set up the camera ideally. And you want to do that so you're thinking about how does the background tell part of the story. In this case, we can see the sky, we can see the vegetation. This is not an urban setting, so this is all part of location scouting. Where exactly will you shoot the video? It helps tell the story. We talked about that earlier about the setting, and it provides some kind of visual interest, better than being on a simple brick background. Many of you who have been watching me throughout this, and we're just on this fake brick background. Doesn't really tell too much of a story. And lighting is so important in making video. Really, what you're doing is you're capturing photons of light. That's coming from the sun, typically bouncing off the people, bouncing off their clothes and their skin into the lens of the camera. Is there enough light? Obviously, you don't want to be shooting video after dark unless it's really part of the plot, part of the story you're trying to tell. Then you have a lighting challenge. Is there too much light? So shooting video in the middle of the day is very challenging. This photograph we're looking at, it looks like it's probably like 11 o'clock in the morning, and you can kind of tell by where the shadows are falling on people's faces. So in the middle of the day, there's just a lot of sun. People are squinting. If they're wearing light colored clothing, camcorders and phones will overexpose. So you want to maybe avoid the middle of the day, but think about, are you going to be if you're choosing your exact spot, are you going to be in a shadow from some trees or a building? And think about the weather forecast. Well, as you get close to the shooting day, can you look a day or two out and make sure that you're not going to have rain or clouds you weren't planning on? And again, think about the time of day. So the wonderful time of day to shoot video is the golden hour. Is typically an hour or two after sunrise, an hour or two before sunset. The light is very evenly dispersed from the sun, and it gives you really just a wonderful balanced light. Again, in this particular example, you can see there's some shadows on people's faces. You still can see their expressions, but really, there are some subtleties in capturing people's mouth. You know, are they frowning or are they smiling? It's a very small part of the video if it's not a close-up. So now we'll talk about how to set up a shot. So here's an example of me coaching an agricultural advisor who had never shot video before. And there's two components in this photograph that we're going to take a look at. So it's the camera, the phone in this case, is on a tripod. So what really makes a fantastic video is a stable picture. So you may not have access to a tripod. So if you have to hold it in your hand, you really want to be sure that it's incredibly steady. And in your mind, what you think is steady when you're holding your hand is different from what a video camera or a phone is recording. So I would say that you need to pretend there's a very hot cup of coffee or tea that's balanced on top of your camera, filled to the brim. And you need to make sure that none of that liquid spills over onto your hand and you're going to get burned. So you would need to hold the camera extraordinarily steady, far steadier than you've imagined in order to get really great video. So what separates amateur video from great video is a steady picture. So if you can get a tripod, by all means, get one. If you're going to shoot with a phone, there are these actual special clamps that will clamp onto a camera, onto a phone. So let's look at the photograph itself. Now this is a photograph of people making video, but right now we're just going to talk about the photograph itself. It's a medium shot. There's several people in the frame. There's the talent on the right, the woman farmer, and there's a group of people on the left. It's got the rule of thirds where you've got people in various components of the shot are in thirds. So this is a really nice shot from this photograph point of view about, it kind of tells a story about the ingredients of it. Again, I mentioned earlier, an insecticide. So we're going to now talk about 5 common mistakes when you're not accustomed to making video deliberately, when you're just kind of like pulling out your phone and shooting. The first one is fire hosing. So this is a slang term, maybe makes more sense in the United States, but it's really when you're trying to put out a fire, you tend to just take a hose and spray the flames all over the place. You're not being incredibly deliberate. So here's an example of fire hosing where the camera operator is just really not being very deliberate in this case. So we'll play this video clip a few times. You know, makes you a little seasick. The person is just really all over the place. Maybe in their mind, they think they're being deliberate and they think that it makes sense. But when you're capturing visuals for an audience later, their minds are actually operating at a different speed than your mind when you're anxious and you're using a camera that maybe you're not accustomed to. So this is probably shot by somebody who just wasn't really being deliberate and methodical, and they were just using their camera. So typically, if you've used your phone to record video for your family or friends, you probably were a bit like this, extemporaneous without a great plan. So that's our first common mistake. Our next common mistake is snap shooting. It's kind of a cousin to the thing that we just looked at, fire hosing. It's where each shot, each clip is a little too short, where you don't really get a chance to take it in. In this case, since I've moved on to this presentation slide, you've got an understanding that this person is younger, it's a male, he's a Caucasian, you know all of that, he's next to a creek. But imagine if we just started with this, where there he is, and suddenly we're on a tree and we're back. So you really need to make sure that each shot has a reasonable duration, that he's not cut off. I mean, he just barely stops talking. You see his lips stop moving, and immediately is the end of the shot. At the end of each shot, you want to make sure that there is maybe 5 seconds of nothingness. You don't need to be anxious to shut off the camera or the phone. Always just have plenty ahead of time. So you want 5 seconds of non-deliberate video in the beginning, just so you can capture it. Again, here he's already moving. So we typically say action, but we really want to start the camera recording before the the on-camera talent are doing anything, and a little bit after. So you really want to avoid snap shooting where there's just not enough. In this case, we cut away to a different item. Our next common video mistake, again, is all people who are not accustomed to this, is motor zooming. So camcorders have a zoom power in their lens, and typically under your fingers, you could zoom in or zoom out. With a phone, you can typically pinch the screen of a phone or spread it in order to zoom. But we really don't want to zoom while we're recording. So here you'll see they'll be zooming during the recording. We're going to zoom out and then zoom in to him again. So while you have the power to do this, you really shouldn't. Zooming is something that you would do in preparing to record video, but not during the recording of video. I mean, someday you can once you become really skilled at this, but zooming during recording requires a great deal of precision. You want to be steady in the speed of the zoom, and extraordinarily slow too. If you begin to watch, as you watch television later today or tonight, when you see a zoom, you'll see that they're actually very, very deliberate, slow, and methodical. And it's just very hard to do, certainly with pinching and spreading with your fingers on a phone. And even with a camcorder, it just requires a great deal of precision that would take many hours of practice. So just in the beginning, just avoid motor zooming. Just don't zoom in or zoom out while you're recording. Classic common mistake. Our next common mistake is jogging. So we talked about this, is that you really should use your camera as if you have a hot cup of coffee on top of it. If you did in this case, you know your fingers or your hand will be burned because this person is being recorded while the camera operator is probably walking backwards, and the camera's not very steady. So what separates good video from poor video is a lack of a steady camera. It makes people a little seasick, and it really does separate the pros from the amateurs. Now, there are wonderful pieces of equipment called a Steadicam that use gyroscopes and springs that allow you to shoot video while you're walking, but those things are out of our access. So really never shoot video while you're walking. Always want to be extraordinarily steady as you're shooting video. Makes the audience a little more pleasant experience when we have a steady camera. And last, we haven't spoken about this. This is backlighting. So our eyes adjust to light and darkness differently than a video camera. So while video cameras and phones are getting better and better all the time, there's still a pretty significant difference. So here on the left, you will see there's just absolute white adjacent to our subject's face. Absolute white. You cannot tell if there's a cloud in the sky or not. And for his face, it's a bit dark. You can tell that maybe he's got a little bit of anger, maybe, but it's not properly lit. And that's because the camera is doing its best to adjust to the darkness of one's face in this case and the background. And also in the way background on the right, you can see the sun is peeking through. Now, when the person actually moves around a little bit, it gets even worse where you have absolute white, and then at the very, very end, we'll hit pause at the very end, there's, we actually don't even see the person's face at all. We don't know if this person is happy or sad. So you never want to shoot into the sun, even if in this case, the subject didn't step away from the sun. You always want the sun on your back so the sunlight is hitting the subject. So backlighting is a very, very common mistake. Always want the sun hitting your back, fully lighting the subject. And ideally, you want that to be distributed light. You want it to be not broken light. If you can see off to the right here, we've got vegetation and there's light streaming through the vegetation in pieces. If it hits somebody, it's going to be mixed light. You want it to be even light as opposed to totally bright light. So those are the 5 common mistakes that amateurs make, and you're not going to make because you're fortunate enough for INEE to have given you this webinar, this workshop. So we'll now talk about audio. The audio could be as recorded as deliberately as video. If you're making a podcast, obviously it's all audio. So one of the things you should do if you have access to a camcorder is to actually put in some earbuds and plug it into the camcorder and listen to what your camera is recording while you're recording it. And if you don't have that ability because you're using your phone, phones are not typically, you're not able to put in a set of earbuds or earphones and listen to what the camera is recording on your phone. Just take a minute and actually devote yourself not to being a camera operator or a composer of a shot, but you're like an audio expert, and just listen to the environment very intently for 15 or 30 seconds. Is there a generator going on in the background? Is there an airplane flying overhead? Are there children making noise in the background that aren't going to help tell the story? Is there a railroad or a train going by, or a road where there's a truck going by? Think really deliberately about the audio. It's a separate discipline. With camcorders and phones, the microphone is on the device itself. So in this case, you can see the lens of the camera. Right below it, there is a microphone, and it's typically 6 feet away from the talent. So the audio is going to be imperfect when you use the in-camera or in-phone microphone. In an ideal world, you would use a a dedicated camera, a dedicated microphone that you would get from a local vendor, and you might need a special adapter for that microphone. So what makes for great videos, getting the microphone as close as possible to the subject's mouth. And again, it's a little tricky. You can buy something called a lavalier or lapel microphone. It clips onto the person's garment, and it's right near their mouth, just a few inches away. In an ideal world, not essential. But now we're going to actually watch a video that was created by one of our partners, in this case in Guatemala, as part of their project to promote the use of IUDs. So can you identify the location, the character, and the plot? So this video is made by people who never made video before, was made with a camcorder and a tripod and a microphone. And the people who appear on camera are local people recruited. They're not actors. There wasn't a word-for-word script. So let's take a look at this video and see if this is something you can aspire to make in the near future. As loud as it can go. Okay, so we'll pause there. Before we get into editing, I wanted to go into a little bit more detail about composing a shot. We're going to go back to just get a photograph here. So even though this is audio quality, I thought this is a great shot. So the photographer who snapped this picture wanted to do a great job of helping me teach you what it's like to shoot video today. So they've incorporated the rule of thirds. This is kind of a medium shot, meaning it's not a super close-up. A close-up would be just the person's face. This is a medium shot, shows the person's shoulders and from their midsection. It also includes the rule of thirds. So typically when we're shooting photographs, we're not being very deliberate. We just kind of put the people in the center. But there's an aesthetic and an artistic method where you have the rule of thirds, where there's someone or a subject in 1/3, or the center, or the outer third. In this case, I also want the people to be looking toward kind of the empty third. So you know that this woman is looking someplace. If we had her at the very edge of the frame, if her nose was kind of toward the left side, it would be less aesthetically pleasing. Now you can see she's gazing at something, and it gives the audience, in this case, all of you, an understanding of what she's interested in. She's looking at something, she's making video in this case. Go to one more example of, no, I'm not going to do that. Okay, let's move ahead. Now we've watched this really interesting video, and now we're going to talk about the goal of editing. So again, this is a complex topic that we could spend 2 hours on, but video editing is best accomplished on a computer. You can get editing apps for a tablet or a phone, but it does require a great deal of precision. When you're trimming clips, it just requires a great deal of precision. So a mouse is a great device to do that. So generally, editing is about condensing time. So you're gonna record lots of video clips in the field when you're shooting, and frankly, most of them are going to be unusable. And the sooner you can erase them, the better, so you can stop thinking about them. If you know that you just shot some video that was poorly lit, or there's some noise in the background, right away on the phone or on the camcorder, delete that, because it's a lot of work to get back to the editing environment and begin to sort through your clips. So you want to condense time by deleting clips that don't make sense and trimming the clips. So you want to trim off that excess that we talked about. You should always have at the beginning of a clip and at the end of a clip. Yeah, but you can do that very precisely. Instead of doing it in the field, you can do it with editing software that typically when we do our projects, we provide that. There's some free downloadable software for desktop computers. Typically, they want you to purchase it later on. So you want to keep the viewer's attention when you're editing video. The name of the game is kind of keep the action moving forward. You'll definitely find in the editing process a great deal of imperfections. There are some people misspoke, perhaps. A shot was too short. Maybe you missed a shot altogether. So when you begin your first editing, you drag the clips, they're called, to your desktop. You delete the clips that are not important. You rename the clips that have the greatest value, and you want to name them something that makes sense to you, like best shot of mother or something like that. And you want to then begin to put them on something called a timeline. That kind of, in an editing software package, all of them use a timeline. And then you begin to polish it and to refine it. And you'll find imperfections that will irritate you. You want to make a list of those imperfections, and then you want to rank their importance. You don't want to, just because you have made an observation of an imperfection first, there might be something that you found that the seventh thing you looked for was actually the most impactful and important. You want to tackle that first. So make your list of imperfections and always be reflecting upon it and rearranging. How do you manage your time in the editing process? You could, lose many hours of your time in the editing process. So you got to always be making priorities, and you got to know when to let go. When you're just going to have to sacrifice perfection, and you have to surrender to what you do have. So again, editing is a really robust topic. Again, we recommend using a laptop or desktop computer because it allows for greater precision, but it's really the most fundamental part of getting the story told. This is where, again, you'd use your storyboard to guide you. It's kind of like color by numbers. And there's, again, in the future, perhaps IMEE will have us back for a separate session on editing and teaching you all how to get access to editing software, but it's a big topic. So that's pretty close to wrapping it up. We're definitely available for lots of questions, and going into greater detail now, and Kristen is going to read off some questions so that we can dialogue about what we've learned so far today.
Yeah. So go ahead, start typing your questions into the chat. While we're waiting for some more questions to filter in, I'd like to go back and read through some of the project plans that you guys put into chat earlier. I've been reading through them, and there are so many really great ideas. And I think it would be a fantastic opportunity for you to hear about what your peers are doing. It will hopefully kind of spark some ideas for you as well to hear from some of their other plans. So someone in room 2 wrote about a story related to female students, about how a donation to Fix a School leads to the ultimate impact of that donation, the impact of that donation through the story of that individual female student's sort of life as it happens after that donation to Fix Her School. There was a really interesting idea about an app to mitigate school violence in Brazil. I'd be so interested to hear more about that. That sounds like a really interesting way to use story. We actually didn't speak at all about apps, but it is absolutely true that if you have the technology to be creating an app, then you can certainly insert video into that as part of the app. Lots of bits about different types of success stories. We have someone writing about a success story they'd like to showcase related to some rural farmers, focusing on the people rather than the organization. I think that kind of does drill down into a very specific thing that we were trying to convey through today's session, that when you do showcase individuals as opposed to like the sort of less human aspects of your organization, then you can convey a very specific type of message that you can't through other forms of medium. Someone had another story related to forced marriages on young girls and how the forced marriage destroys the lives of many young age women. That's a very impactful story, very evocative. How to advocate for refugee-led organizations. I loved this idea from room 11, using storytelling or film to convey key points of research findings. This will be a 3-minute video simplifying these key points so that anybody can take advantage of them, and those who need or wish to delve deeper can read the academic paper. That's a fantastic idea. I absolutely love that idea, and I might even take that back into my day job to think about how I can use sort of that concept in my work as well. Someone in room 7 wrote about a story about how students who were kidnapped from their dorms in Nigeria, sort of the impact of that event on their lives. We will go to a survivor to know what happened during the kidnapping. The message is to address the consequences of not having safe spaces to study. That is such an evocative thing that is very well conveyed through a story. Let's see. More stories related to stereotypes. I like this idea as well from room 9, a monthly email series on one refugee story. I think being able to build a story through a medium such as an email campaign is a really great idea, and one that is sometimes a lot more feasible right now with maybe the technology that you have, if you do not have access to a video recorder or especially editing software. Someone else highlighted that they want to create stories about teachers using stories. That's great. That's a fantastic little insight there. And then someone mentioned sharing best practices. And sharing best practices is especially something that Illuminate works really closely with partners with. That's kind of the bread and butter of the videos that individuals partnering with Illuminate are focusing on, how to share best practices in given industries and sectors. So that's a really great way of using video technology. Okay, let's move now into some questions. So the first question that we have is, what would be some strategies for incorporating the storytelling for incorporating the storyteller into the videos? So for transparency purposes, showing the process, how else, Matt, would you recommend that someone maybe incorporate the storyteller into the videos?
So the storyteller kind of technically could be the narrator who never appears visually. So they're never identified, and you never see what they look like, and you never hear their name. And that's a very common technique. And as you begin to watch television later today, or next time you see a motion picture, that's pretty common. You could have the narrator who's never seen. You could have them identify themselves at the very beginning of the story, or occasionally throughout the story. If you really want them to be part of the story, it's really up to you. Since you're asking the question, you must have a hunch that it would add value. It would provide credibility or authenticity. So it's really up to you. If you want the storyteller to appear visually, you can do that as well. In this time that we're spending together as a group, I'm kind of the storyteller, and you do see me, so you get to know me, and I'm the teacher in this case. So you could have the main character could be the storyteller. There's nothing preventing you from doing that. So you've got your choice of having you could never have a storyteller who's deliberate or a character, because you just always have on-camera talent. If you do have a narrator, they don't need to identify themselves. You're just kind of recording their voice throughout the process. They could identify themselves audibly, but not visually, or they could identify themselves visually as well. So those are your choices. And if there's a follow-up question for that, feel free to put it back in the chat for Kristen to ask on that again.
Thanks. We have a question. Can you suggest affordable softwares for video editing, specifically Windows systems?
Okay, yeah, there's several that you can download for free. Some have a limit of like 2 weeks. So all of you who know Windows have known that there's something called Paint or Draw. So it's a basic Windows utility. Several years ago, Microsoft offered something called Windows Movie Maker. And it was about similar to operate like Paint or Draw, but they actually discontinued it. But if you have Windows 10 now, you can download something like that from Microsoft. So with Windows 10, it is available, but not with Windows 7. It's just no longer available. You can download some. Well, I would say you can, in your area, it might be kind of different. You can always use a search like Google or Bing to search for free video editing software. But the marketplace is predominantly on the Mac platform. There's iMovie, and most of us in the space that we all work in, Macintosh products, Apple products are quite expensive, so they're not as available. But iMovie on the Mac side. On the PC side, again, this is what the question was for Windows. There's Corel Video Studio. Again, they have a free downloadable version for a few weeks, perhaps. There is Cyberlink Video Director, and maybe we can put this in the chat, actually, Cyberlink Video Director and Corel Video Studio. And also we have, on the Adobe side, there is something called Rush, R-U-S-H. Rush is free for a phone. You can download it as an Android app on a phone. If you want to use it on a desktop computer, you need to purchase it as a piece of software. So those are the three that are the most popular in terms of installs around the world today. And again, over the course of time, there are software that are available for free, and some of them are open source, but they're not updated as often. So as a follow-up to this session, we can provide some direct links to other software packages that may be appropriate for you guys.
We have a question. What time would be the best to take capture? And I imagine they're speaking about lighting.
Yeah, so I mentioned before the golden hour, and there's actually an app called the Golden Hour Calculator. You really don't need it, but it changes every day. So since the sun rises and sets at different times every day throughout the year, in some places, like around the equator, it doesn't change too much, but the closer you get to the poles, the more dramatically it changes. So it's really just an hour or two before the sun goes down, an hour or two after the sun comes up. You have very evenly dispersed light. You also can try to deliberately shoot on a cloudy day when there is no direct sunlight, but still plenty of light to shoot video. So you really want dispersed light in an ideal world. You want to be able to have avoid people squinting, and you will want to avoid people having excessive light on their skin. In this case, on the screen now, you see a little boy, well lit because he's inside. He's being lit from a window, but very well lit. We're really fortunate to have this photograph as an example. But really, it's beginning of the day or the end of the day. It's kind of the short answer to that question.
What insights do you have about filming in active environments such as classrooms or busy spaces with lots of action?
Yeah, so you want to do your very best to take control of that. So when you're not controlling things, technically you're making a documentary where you're supposed to document the world as it is. You are not to be disturbing the reality. You're recording reality, and very few of you are going to be making documentaries. So while it's always something you should avoid bothering teachers, maybe after the class is over or before the class begins, you should do your best to be a director, and you actually coach talent. You don't necessarily be a director where you're telling them exactly what to say, but you really want to be deliberate. You want to just have as few people in the environment as possible to avoid background noises and things that are unfocused. So in an active environment, I'd say try to schedule some time after that. During the action, you can make notes of what you want, and then you want to give some suggestions to the talent about what you want them to say. If it's important to you that you're actually recording something that's more real, I guess the thing is to try to get some assistance to control the people in the room who are not that vital. So make sure that they're not too loud, distracting with their audio, or they're not too distracting visually. One thing you do when you all of us know this, when you're pointing a camera someplace around young people, they just tend to jump around near the camera because they want to be on the camera. So you want to do your best to have assistants kind of controlling that. That's one of the things that we do is we really want to direct the talent and all of the people who appear on camera. And sometimes we can do that really, really well. Other times it's kind of out of our control. Well, we need assistance, really.
Do you have any insight into using drone videography?
Operating a drone is a separate discipline altogether. It's hard to get these things, although never before has it been as easy, but it's really, they make incredibly great video. Every drone, comes with fantastic video cameras. I would recommend a typical attendee for this workshop. I'd imagine you should just try to find a drone operator and get them to do this for you rather than you attempting to borrow a drone and use it, because it's the skills to pilot it are quite significant, and the risk of damage to either the drone itself or things you could crash into are quite acute. And actually just recording good video from a drone, it takes discipline. You got to pilot the drone and you've got to pan, tilt, or zoom the video. We talked about avoiding zooming while you're shooting. So there's no doubt that one drone shot in your video, especially at the establishing shot, at the very beginning, a wide shot showing a village or a schoolyard, accompanied maybe sometimes with a shot of a map that you can download off the internet, is a great way to start a video. But access to drones is tricky, and certainly learning to operate them is even trickier. So I would say if you can get someone with a drone to help you just with one clip, the establishing shot would really be the most valuable thing for a drone and a video that you're trying to make.
What advice do you have about filming interviews?
So yeah, good question. Interviewing is an art form in and of itself. So there's a lot to that. We could do a session on that. We have a whole session on it. I'll compress it now for you because all of you will probably be doing this. So when people are scheduled to be interviewed in front of a camera, they're, almost all of them are going to be nervous. So you need to just kind of pack in an extra 20 minutes where you set up the camera, you point it at them, and whether or not you decide to record or not is up to you, but you just make them believe that they're being recorded because there's this kind of acclimation process. They're going to not act relaxed and typical in the first minute versus the very last minute. So you really just need to desensitize them to being on-camera talent. So allocate time for acclimation would be one, and give them the questions ahead of time, but encourage them not to memorize answers. You should ask them questions off camera. You could be on camera if you want you as an interviewer to be on camera next to them or something, but ask them the questions typically off camera. And you want them to answer the question. Embedded in the question would be, embedded in the answer would be the question. So if I was going to interview Kristen and say, Kristen, tell me, how did you get here today? And instead of her just saying a bicycle, she would say, I got here today by bicycle. So you always want to make sure that the on-camera talent is answering the question fully, but not as if they're answering a question. If someone says, where were you born? Instead of just saying Nairobi, you say, I was born in Nairobi. If you ask them, how long have you been teaching? They don't just say 7 years. They say, I've been teaching for 7 years. So coach them to give an answer that includes the context of the question. So we've got this desensitization process. We have embedding the question's meaning in the answer. And we also have kind of follow-up questions. So you want to get through all of your questions, but then you want to go back and maybe get a little more thorough answer by asking the same question again. And frankly, the second time they answer a question, it's more genuine and relaxed because they kind of think it's over with. They think the formal video process is over, and you get actually a higher quality result by seemingly concluding the interview, leaving the camera recording, and asking some follow-up questions. I would say too that you want to constantly assure the person that you're doing a great job, because most people that you're going to be interviewing have not been on camera often, and they're just very intimidated. So a constant assurance that they're doing a great job to help you tell a story that's really important to tell, and encourage them to be ministers of sorts with you, or servants. You're serving the poor, serving the beneficiaries by helping provide great information that distant people who are in charge of finances or resources are going to be influenced by what you're doing. That could be quite intimidating, but maybe it could inspire them to reach deep inside themselves and just be extraordinarily effective and maybe more genuine. It's a little risky. So there's some basic tips on conducting a great interview.
Do you have any recommendations for free or maybe cheap software for easy scripting and storyboarding?
So in my humble opinion, I would avoid the complications of additional applications. So you could script with a pencil or a pen and a piece of paper Or if you really do prefer word processing like Microsoft Word or Google Doc, just use the simplest things possible. Even though we showed an AV script, you still could just put a line down in the middle of a piece of paper, or you have two columns in a word processor or on a Word doc. And for storyboarding, you know, frankly, it's just way easier to draw stick figures with a pen than it is with applications. But you could, you know, you could use Bing or Google that to get software. We don't recommend it though. I think trying to make this extraordinarily approachable. You can do all of your pre-production with incredibly low-tech solutions to allow you to, you know, avoid friction on the journey from conceptualization to getting your final video done. Again, you can use Google to find some, but we actually we never recommend it. And part of our full-blown, we typically do a 4-day workshop, and we spend an entire morning on pre-production. We don't recommend using unique software for pre-production.
One note, if you did download the workbook as part of the session, there are some templates for these things, an AV script as well as a blank storyboard, so you can utilize those. There is also a link in the workbook if you do need some sort of like virtual or digital storyboard because you're working on it with people who are not near you. Of course, that's like most of us these days. There are a few options. It's called like Whiteboard, as in WITE board, and that is a digital storyboard. But as Matt said, like I would recommend those tools are the most basics where you are like drawing with your mouse stick figures. All right, we have time for maybe just like 2 more questions. This is a very timely one. How can we produce good quality video amid COVID-19 when we are unable to travel to shoot the video? I know that you are traveling very soon for some project work.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to get vaccinated because we're actually going to do a project in Liberia helping the Liberians to cope with the pandemic. So most of you are far from getting a vaccine, and some of you, for all we know, may never get vaccinated. So, you know, you need to do your best to try to recruit storytellers or talent near you and shoot them, you know, nearby. And, you know, often, besides that establishing shot, which maybe you can download an establishing shot off of the internet, or maybe someone can get you a photograph, because you can certainly use a photograph in a video that is the establishing shot. After the people start to talk about their experience or their story, it could be done in a place that's not the real McCoy or not the real location. So again, here I am with these bricks behind me. You don't really know if I'm in Germany or if I'm in Agawatu, Burkina Faso, or if I'm in Sri Lanka. You don't really know. So you can, you know, pretend you're someplace else, even if you're outside and there's vegetation in the background. You know, you probably want to be a little mindful about the vegetation that could be telltale. So you can shoot video out of proper location, thereby, you know, pretending. Certainly in Bollywood and in Hollywood and in Nollywood in Nigeria, they're always shooting videos and films in the locations that are not real. They have sets that are artificial. They use green screen. I don't know if we haven't spoken too much about green screen. It's a pretty advanced feature. So inside of video editing software, there is a feature, and inside of Zoom, in fact, all of you may know that you can, it'll take out the background and replace it with a different visual. So green screen is one way to transport oneself or the talent to a different location. So I would say that you can shoot out of location. And also, we didn't touch on this, but certainly you all know that you can shoot out of sequence. If you have a video that has, you know, 7 scenes in it, you don't need to shoot scene 1 first. You can shoot scene 3 before you shoot scene 1, and you can shoot scene 5 before you shoot scene 2. So you can shoot things out of sequence, but also out of genuine location. So you've just got to be as ingenious as possible when you're in this pandemic, because it's an unfortunate period of time, but also a vital time to tell great stories.
All right. This will be our last question. Any suggestions for follow-up trainings with Illuminate, or in other words, how can people get in contact with Illuminate after this workshop?
Okay, so you know, you can go to our website, illuminate.org, to learn more about kind of what we do. You know, there's so much to learn about storytelling. And actually, there's a question we often get. I'm gonna try to see if I can't go out and get the couple of pictures. Just wanted to show you guys. So pardon me for being so messy here, but I want to go to two photographs that I have here about the microphone. So microphones are really, really important. Here's what a lapel microphone looks like. You'll see that it just clips on their wardrobe. It's you know, if you're fortunate, you can buy this for maybe $30 US, but you've got to get to a highly specialized electronics store, probably in your capital city. And the way that it connects to your phone, especially, is with a special adapter. So this is the trickiest thing, is finding the appropriate adapter. And it's far too much to get into here, but don't be surprised that if you do get access to a microphone, that it doesn't work because you need an adapter. You might notice here that there's 3 rings on this this particular 1/4 inch or 3.5 millimeter plug, and this has 2 rings. So again, this gets kind of deep here, but I encourage you to use a microphone, a lavalier microphone. You can get it at a specialty store. You might need an adapter. You might want to actually get the retailer to test it with you before you actually buy it. So again, thanks for letting me kind of go into that detail. So yeah, you can get a hold of Illuminate by visiting our website, illuminate.org. And I lost our presentation there. And we would just really love to help you guys learn more, become more effective in making video. And I just wanted to thank you all for joining us today and being a part of this, and look forward to working with all of you again in the future. Maybe I'll turn it back over to Gustavo to kind of wrap up.
Sorry, Matt, I think Gustavo's internet went down, so you're stuck with me for saying a few words to finish off. I'm going to read out what Gustavo sent me, so if that's okay to everybody. Just for everybody who doesn't know me, my name's Lindsay Bird, and I'm the interim advocacy coordinator for the advocacy working group at INEE. Yeah, I just want to say personally, this was so exciting for me personally, not just, and I hope for everybody else. It was just a fantastic workshop, and I learned so much. And thank you so much, Matt and Kristen and all of the team for this workshop. I hope that everybody will be able to apply some of the tools and the concepts that have been shared. And if people would like to share their stories as you go along, please do send them in to us, because we'd really like to hear from you as to how this workshop has helped you in telling your stories, and get some feedback from you as well. So I don't know, Peter Transberg, who's, you know, we also have to thank for making this happen, and the rest of the communications team. Maybe he can say something if there's going to be a feedback survey or something of this, because I think it was such an important workshop. And I think we've learned something about the power of storytelling. I don't think I realized quite the depth that we could go into, and the different perspectives that everybody has and brings to one simple story. I was so sort of bowled over by all of the different viewpoints on that very simple little video at the very beginning, and here's so many people had different ideas. So just to finish off in terms of INEE and what we do, I'd like to just say, for the advocacy working group, we're part of the INEE, which is a network of over 18,000 members, and the advocacy working group is just one of the network spaces that members can engage in all of the activities like this one, and there are so many resources and webinars going on within INE. So I'd encourage you, if you're not a member already, please join, it's free. And you know, the whole idea of advocacy and what we're trying to do and amplify the members' voices in amongst the advocacy working group. You know, we're trying to make sure that there's collective change, which you are all also involved in, and there's change around the world and change in education in emergency. So we really believe that this storytelling is a critical way forward. It's a very strong and powerful mechanism for taking some of the work that we do. You know, we need to share these stories and the voices and amplify the voices of children and youth and teachers and the families who we're working with. So this is why we want to capture a lot of these stories, so that we can advocate to influence the policies that governments, you know, like we heard about that story in, you know, the Nigeria of the child being kidnapped. You know, we want to influence the government to protect schools. You know, that's a powerful message. It's a powerful storytelling message. We need to keep education at the forefront of our response in COVID and all of the other emergencies. So, and very finally, thank you so much to everybody who's participated. I know quite a lot of people have dropped off since, but I think a lot of people really, I've had feedback through the chat that people have really enjoyed this workshop and have already come away with lots of ideas. And please do keep in touch with us and with INE's activities and make use of the resources. As Peter's just put in the chat, we'll share the recording, the presentation, and you'll have access to all of that through INE's website. So thank you again, Matt and Christine. It's such a pleasure to be with you today, and thanks everybody for joining. So over to you, Matt, to say the final word.
Again, thank you all. It's great to see you. Just went into the other view, seeing all of your names. So it's wonderful to be supporting you and all of the incredibly important work you do, helping to keep our education systems going through an emergency. So more power to you. Now go out and make some video. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.